Great. Good morning, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to our academic workshop this morning. My name is Caroline Omaleski. I work at the Office of International Affairs. I coordinate this workshop series, and I'm happy that Lauren Putz from the Dennis Learning Center can join us as our presenter this morning. Before we start our presentation, I want to remind you to check out the orientation calendar that is full for today. We have lots of fun stuff going on for today. It looks like there are a couple swimming classes. There's a game night tonight through OIA. So if you're free throughout the day and evening, make sure you check that out. We have a lot going on before the start of classes. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Lauren for her presentation about preparing effective papers.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for that introduction, Caroline. I really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get started. All right, so today we're going to be talking about preparing effective papers. So we like to call this presentation Preparing Effective Papers the Right Way. And today, we are just hoping to take the stress out of writing just a little bit more for all students. So today we're going to talk about choosing a topic, developing a thesis, creating an outline, conducting research, writing, revising and editing, and then finally overcoming writing hurdles. So first we want to start with choosing a good topic. So there might be some criteria for a good topic. Some criteria could be familiar, interesting, important, sufficient detail, attainable, meets requirements. So with all of these put together, we want to make sure that you are choosing a topic that you are familiar with, that you can understand, something that interests you personally so you don't get bored while you're writing it. Make sure it's important to the class. Make sure that you are able to find sufficient detail while you are doing research for this topic. Make sure that the topic, again, is attainable. So that kind of goes back to the sufficient detail. Making sure that you can find the necessary resources that you may need. And then always make sure that your topic meets the requirements of the class. So just as a quick little question, are there any other types of criteria that you think make a good topic? You can go ahead and type them in the chat if you think of any. But I really like making sure that my topic is important to me, is interesting to me, and is something that I, can look back on and be proud of when I write a paper. And if you guys have any ideas, you can write them in the chat. If not, we will go ahead and just keep on moving. Awesome. All right. So when we are talking about brainstorming topics, we can always use charts. So if you have multiple topics that you are trying to narrow down, you can make a chart kind of like this. So our possible topics are, what is the scope of the topic? Is the topic academic enough information available? And then does the topic fit project requirements? So you can say, possible topic A, possible topic B, and possible topic C, and then answer all these questions to kind of narrow down which one may be the best. If you guys want to, you can absolutely go ahead and just take a picture of this slide so you know how to set up a chart further down the line when you are asked to write a paper. But this kind of chart is very helpful if you are having trouble narrowing down to just one topic when you're writing a paper. Awesome. Okay. Perfect. And then when we are thinking about topics, we also want to keep them narrow. So make sure that you are being as specific as possible when you are like making your topic when you are thinking of your thesis. That way you know exactly where to go with your paper when you get to the writing aspect. So in this example, we're going from motivation to asking why motivation is important to saying why motivation is a critical aspect of academic success for college students. So that is the most narrow that it can get, which is awesome. And then next, this next little example is kind of another way that you can think of how to narrow down a topic as an upside down triangle. So the first question asks, what are the effects of ability grouping? Next, we want to think about what are the effects of ability grouping in high schools. And then finally, our most narrow is going to be, what are the determinants of ability grouping or what are the detriments of ability grouping in high school advanced placement classes? So that is the most narrow topic that you can get from ability grouping, which is an educational psychology topic that we talk a lot about at the DLC within our research. So we're going to try it out together. Narrow down this topic using a flow chart. So cats versus dogs. So think of it as our motivation, why motivation is important, and then why motivation is a critical aspect of academic success for college students. So we can work on this together. So our first little flow chart square may say cats versus dogs. The next may say cats are better than dogs. And then the last one may say cats are better than dogs because they're easier to take care of. And then that is going to be your topic. And that's the kind of argument that you're going to support throughout your essay. All right. So next we're going to move on to developing theses. So a thesis is a statement or a theory that is put forward as a premise to be maintained or proved. So we're always making sure that puts forth the premise to be maintained. Usually we say that the thesis is the writer's argument or point of view. This implies a strong personal opinion, which sometimes isn't always the case. It can be helpful to think of it as a premise to be maintained rather than a point of view. Even less opinionated papers have a premise that you're trying to maintain. So just kind of like keep that in mind when you are thinking about your thesis. It's just an argument that you need to make sure that you support throughout your paper. When we're talking about the outlines, the points that you'll make, it's important to have organizational cues that make the paper flow for the reader, which we will get into a little bit later when we're talking about writing the paper. And then finally, keeps you organized when you're writing. It's also an organizational cue for the writer, as it's easy to get lost or jumbled when writing. So just kind of think of the thesis as something to always come back to and something that you are always trying to support throughout your writing. So when you are thinking about writing papers, there are 3 different types of papers that will affect your thesis. So an analytical paper breaks down components and evaluates them, and you're thinking about analyzing here. So an analytical paper may be found, in a science class more often than not, or in a public policy class where you are trying to, just go back and analyze a paper or a different type of like writing that's already out there and you're trying to analyze it. The next is going to be expository, where you're explaining your ideas, processes, or phenomenon. So always remember to explain when you're writing an expository paper. And then the last is going to be argumentative. This is where you're going to make a claim and support it throughout the paper, and then you use evidence to support it. So you're going to think of analytical as analyze, expository as explain, and then argumentative as argue. So in analytical essays, examples like that are going to be lab reports. You're going to break down the components of the experiment and evaluate the experiment in the discussion section. So it's going to be really important that you make sure that you're able to have a thesis where you can analyze all of these components together. So always think of analytical essays as analyze. And then expository essays are going to be essay exam responses. So maybe you're given a question in an essay where you're just trying to explain the topic at hand, or you're asked to write a short essay that explains ideas from the class. This is going to be very factual, and here you can see that you could have an expository essay in almost any kind of class. So always think of these as explain. And then finally, with our argumentative essays, a lot of times we're going to see these in our English classes or writing an English paper. Your thesis makes your claim very clear. It does involve research, and the main goal is to convince your audience that the claim is true and that the evidence that you've supported is correct. So this is where your thesis is really going to come into play, especially with these argumentative essays, because you're trying to prove your thesis throughout the essay. So here, always think of it as argue. Awesome. And now we're going to move on to creating an outline. So when we're talking about creating an outline, there are two different types that you could fall on if you are interested in learning more about those. So the first one is a formal outline. The outlining is really helpful to let you see if your argument proves your thesis and if your thesis is appropriate for the type of paper that you're writing, which can be very helpful to make sure that you're staying on the right track. So these formal outlines are going to be the most commonly used, especially with groups of students who may, feel like this is a better way to copy and paste into an actual paper. Or you could use a mind map, which is super visual and it's great for making connections between points. And it's not linear, and we're not doing like chronological organization here. So with a mind map, you can absolutely see that like we can make connections between multiple topics and things like that, and that can be kind of helpful. But if your brain isn't wired like that, you can always use a formal outline where you are writing down your introductory paragraph, creating that main topic sentence, and then having supporting topics, and then going from there as well. And then if you are interested in creating mind maps, bubble.us is a great website to be able to do this online. If you guys do have iPads through Ohio State, writing that out in Notability can be very helpful. But this is just an example of an assignment for a biology course about the origins of hope and belief. You can see the interrelations between all of the different bubbles with the gray arrows, and it's also color coded, which can be super helpful. So if you guys are interested in making those mind maps, you can always use bubble.us, and I can put that in the chat for you guys really quick. Awesome. All right. So moving on to conducting research. So we want to talk a little bit about what we consider a credible source before we move on to talking about conducting research. So do you guys have any ideas about what a credible source may be at Ohio State? I can give you guys just a few minutes to think about this, and you can type your answers into the chat. But if you're confused as to what a credible source is, we will go ahead and talk about that a little later. Yeah. Ananya said research papers and books. Atharva said books from the libraries. Absolutely. Mohammed said previous literature. Yeah. Jingwen said Google Scholar. Absolutely. Guys, these are all really great. Thank you so much for participating in that. I really appreciate it. But yeah, you guys are absolutely on the right track, and I am going to show you a few resources that will help you get to all of these things very easily. So we always want to consider the source when we are doing our research. So we want to make sure that it is scholarly or peer-reviewed in a published journal. So anything from a published journal like Boston Medical Journal, I think that's the first one that comes to mind. Anything like that, that is like a scholarly journal you can always trust. Anything that has a DOI, almost always you can trust with that. Make sure that it is recent or historically relevant. So picking, an article about vaccine effectiveness from 1975 might not be as relevant as something that you may see now about vaccine effectiveness from like 2020. So make sure that you're looking at those dates when you are doing your research. Make sure that your research has unbiased motives. So unbiased motives are making sure that you are being aware of who's writing the article, why they're writing the article, and if there are any motives behind it. So making sure that you go down through the article and you read all of the, where the funding is coming from, why the article was written, and then if there are any biases or limitations to the experiment or the article that's being written, most scholarly articles will have that in there. Make sure that when you are looking at your research, there are strong supporting arguments and you can understand them clearly. And then finally, cite those credible sources in a bibliography. So you can cite those, you can cite the sources that you are looking at in your bibliography, but you also want to make sure that the scholarly article that you're looking at is citing credible sources in their bibliography as well. And then that is another great resource bank for you to go back at and look through, or go back to and look through, so you can find more resources if you need them. So I think something really great about Ohio State is that we are, in fact, a research institution. So OSU is a research library and it has lots of resources, and the library's online page is a great way to find credible resources if you're not sure where to start. It's kind of like Google Scholar, but through Ohio State, so you will have access to all of the articles for free. So you can go ahead and go to library.osu.edu, and I can put that in the chat for you guys as well, but it will pull up this page where you can search the WorldCat at OSU for anything that you may be looking for in terms of books, articles, journals, and media for your research. And then I will go ahead and put that in the chat really quick. But I found this to be super helpful, especially because, you're not going to have to pay to see any of the resources on here like you may have to through Google Scholar. Perfect. All right. And then if you are concerned about making good choices when you are using academic resources and things like that, there is a really great ebook through OSU libraries, which you guys can see right here, that can kind of walk you through how to make the best choice in terms of choosing those resources. So I will go ahead and put that in the chat as well. And this book has really helped me, especially the first couple times that I wrote essays or argumentative essays for Ohio State. I think that it was really important for me to understand how to cite my sources, what to trust, and making sure that I'm writing a credible argumentative essay or a credible expository essay, things like that, to present back to my professors without fear of getting in trouble for plagiarism or choosing the wrong sources, things like that. So next, we want to talk a little bit about organizing our research as well. So make sure you know which parts of the information and research that you've done goes with which source and page number. So a really great way to do this is to use Zotero as well as Evernote, and then I am blanking on the source, Scanner Pro, sorry. So with these resources, Zotero especially, you can add them into your Microsoft Word plugin, and it can help you make sure that you are collecting all of the citations and page numbers and things like that, especially when you are doing research. Make sure you cite your sources before you start writing and make those in-text citations beforehand so they'll be ready when you start writing. I can say that I've fallen victim to just going ahead and writing my paper and it does not end well because I don't remember which sources go with which supporting claim that I've made, and then I always forget to make the in-text citations as well. So just doing that beforehand can really speed up your writing process as well. And then always bookmark those links to your sources. I can't tell you how many bookmarks I have just going down and down and down on my Google Chrome plugin, because I save all of my sources until I'm done writing an essay. I do forget to take them down sometimes after I'm done writing the essay, but just bookmarking those links, make sure that you can always go back to them and make sure that you cite them properly. Awesome. So now we're going to get into writing. Most, if not all, students are going to be familiar with the 5-paragraph essay. Just make sure to take away from the 5-paragraph essay and apply college writing in the hourglass structure. So the hourglass structure is going to be an observation, question, methods, and then results, conclusions, and what's next. And then you can kind of flip it and keep going. So we are trying to move away from that 5-paragraph essay and make our essays flow a little bit better in terms of making sure that we are presenting the background of what we're trying to write about. We're giving our thesis, we are giving support to our thesis, and we're summarizing it. And then we're also including why it matters and why we need to continue to do research on it. So think of it as going from wide is general and then narrow is more specific. So first we want to start with an introduction. So make sure that you introduce the topic with the necessary background information, and you can kind of think of this as how scientists will write those scholarly articles where they have a long introduction section that kind of explains why they've chosen to do this research, why they've chosen to do the experiment, and what the issue surrounding the experiment is. Make sure that you orient readers in the conversation. So, what have other scholars or scientists said about the topic that you're writing about? And then always use the thesis to enter the conversation, which means like finishing out the paragraph that is your introduction and making sure to say like, okay, this is what I believe and here is what the rest of the paper is going to be about. So in our body, every body paragraph should have a clear topic sentence. And I know that sometimes topic sentences can be a little bit hard to decide on because the rest of your body paragraph should follow that topic sentence. So I am going to link some Purdue OWL helpfulness in the chat as well. There are a few links that can be very helpful to learning a little bit more about writing topic sentences, some good examples, and then making sure that you are linking those paragraphs by using transitional devices. So you can say to add, equally important, furthermore, what's more, to repeat, and brief, as I have noted, or if you need to give an example, you can say to demonstrate in an instant like this, or to summarize and conclude, you can say on the whole, summing up, or thus. So there are a few resources that I'm going to put in the chat really quick, just so you guys can make the most out of using those transitional phrases and things like that. Awesome. All right. And then it's helpful when you are thinking about your body paragraphs to flesh out those arguments kind of like a lawyer. So we want to always, write like a lawyer. You should provide evidence for every claim. You should state the obvious, even if it doesn't seem like it needs to be said. You don't know who your audience is going to be, so making sure that you just state the obvious is going to be very helpful. And then doing these two things really makes your argument stronger, more clear and organized, and helps to convince your reader just a little bit more. And then finally, in your conclusion paragraphs. We don't just want to rephrase the introduction, and we don't just want to summarize the paper. You can always discuss the implications of your argument. So what can be done next in terms of this scientific finding that you might be writing about, why it's important, all of those good things. And then you can always propose further discussion as well, which kind of leads to a larger discussion and a larger conversation for other people to continue to write about or to, talk to you about. Make sure that you use those strong and simple words. That way it always packs a punch. And then finally, we want to talk about revising and editing. So the best way to start that revising and editing is to finish your paper and then take a break. Yeah, Mohammed, that was a great question. Could you write the negative outcomes in the conclusion? Absolutely, you could. That is a really great point. That's kind of just like wrapping up, and it's a discussion where you're describing the results, where you are talking about implications that may be negative or positive of the study that you're writing about, all those good things. Great question. Thank you very much. So a great tip to start that editing process is to just take a break a few days before you edit or revise. So make sure that you're finishing your paper in enough time to allow yourself a break, and then go back to your paper and start revising and editing. Make sure that you try to read aloud so you hear how everything is coming together. Reading aloud can also help you determine if there are any mistakes in your grammar or things like that that you might not notice while you're reading just in your head. You can always get someone else to read it to check the content, grammar, and spelling. I know a lot of professors would be happy to just take a look at it to make sure that you are on the right track, but maybe like a friend or a roommate might be a great resource to use to check that content and grammar as well. Always make sure that you print it out and mark it up. Having like the red on black contrast when you are using a red pen to mark your mistakes makes it easier to spot than on a computer screen. If you're interested, you could also download your paper onto Notability on your iPad and then mark it up that way as well. And then finally, double check spell check, because spell check isn't always going to be perfect. So this is really important when you're looking at your spelling as well. And if you're not sure if you spelled a word right or not, you can always ask one of your friends or see the professor. Or also Google it if you would like. And then finally, a great tip to helping make sure that your writing goes smoothly is to go to the Writing Center. The Writing Center is a wonderful resource at Ohio State that is free to students, where you can make an appointment with a writing coach, and they are able to help you go over papers, make sure that they're edited properly, make sure that there aren't any mistakes in them that you might be missing. You can also just work one-on-one with a coach to learn more about how to create citations and bibliographies, how to summarize and paraphrase, how to write introductions, conclusions, and body paragraphs. They're also able to give you a proofreading checklist and proper grammar tips. And then there are also handouts that they have to help you with effective resumes, theses, and dissertations as well, if you are interested in any of that. But the Writing Center is really, really amazing. I'm going to put their handouts in the chat really quick. Maybe not. Okay. Yes. Awesome. All right. That worked. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, the Writing Center is really awesome. I've utilized them before. I think that they are super helpful, and I can't say enough about them. And if you go to the Writing Center website, you can just look up Writing Center Ohio State. You can absolutely schedule an appointment with one of their coaches to help you go over your paper as well. So finally, we want to talk a little bit about overcoming writing hurdles. So just before we start, it definitely is likely that your thesis is going to change as you develop your ideas in the writing stage, but it's totally okay to kind of let it sit and decide if you do want to change it or not, but don't try to edit it as you go. Make sure that you finish a first draft and then edit the statement during the revision process, because changing it bit by bit is going to make it more confusing and you're going to get completely off track if you do that. So just make sure that you leave the thesis statement as is until you write your first rough draft, and then you can go ahead and see what needs to be changed so it better supports your claims. So some really great tips to overcoming those writing hurdles are going to be meeting with your professor to discuss expectations, especially if it's one of your first times writing a paper for that professor. Make sure that you break up the paper into segments and work over time. This is one of my favorite tips to give to students because it feels really overwhelming to write an entire essay all at once. So making sure that you are breaking up the paper and saying like, okay, my assignment for today is to write the introduction paragraph, or my assignment for today is to finish editing. Things like that can really help you feel more in control of the writing process. Make sure to reward yourself for accomplishing your goals. So this kind of goes back to breaking up the paper into smaller segments. So once you finish that introduction paragraph, make sure that you reward yourself with a break, or, you know, a trip to your favorite ice cream place, or whatever it is that you like to reward yourself. Whatever it is that you like to reward yourself with. Make sure that you are, you know, like properly giving yourself a break for doing the right things and getting your paper finished. And then do not edit as you are writing. So just, you know, just write and get it all out. And then that is going to be your first draft, and then go back and edit. So even if you notice like a spelling mistake, or you're like, oh, you know, like I definitely noticed this grammar mistake, don't edit it yet until you finish that entire first draft. And then finally, don't change your thesis as you write, as we were talking about a little bit earlier. Just make sure that you wait until the revision stage for that. That way your thesis doesn't end up not supporting your claims at all. All right, so we definitely flew through that. Does anybody have any questions that I could answer now about the writing process, or anything else that we've covered in this presentation? You guys can absolutely shout out if you have any questions. But I love talking about writing papers. Okay, awesome. We will move on. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to just shout them out. But if you guys would like to, feel free to take a second to scan this QR code and give us any and all feedback that you may have about this presentation. This presentation is our preparing papers presentation. And then we're always looking for any kind of feedback. It really helps us make sure that we are giving quality presentations to you guys. Thank you all so much for participating. And I'm just going to take a second to talk a little bit about the Dennis Learning Center and how we can support you guys throughout your academic careers. So first we do workshops. Right now you guys are in our preparing papers workshop, but we also have workshops on procrastination, memory tools, stress less, note taking, effective study groups, confident test taking, we're in preparing papers, the secrets of academic success, and then gearing up for higher education. So if you guys are interested in workshops like these and you are in a student group, you can absolutely request them. And then we are also giving a workshop series through the Dennis Learning Center right now. And I will link our website so you guys can look up which presentations we are giving before the school year starts. We also have classes. So our headlining class is ESPY 1259, which is our learning and motivation strategies. But we are very excited about this class. I think it's available both fall and spring semesters. So if you guys are interested in that, please feel free to look it up and learn a little bit more. But they are proven, all of these classes, if taken and then the strategies are used properly and consistently, are proven to help your GPA improve. And then finally, we have our coaching, which is what I do for work. They are free, unlimited 1-hour meetings with a coach where we can talk about any and all of your academic struggles, where we can help you set goals and improve your academics throughout the year. But thank you all again so much for participating. If you're interested, you can follow our Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at DLC_OSU. We have a lot of information coming up on our workshop series and things like that. But I really appreciate your time and attention today. So I will go ahead and pass it back to Caroline.
Thank you, Lauren. Thanks for the great presentation. Before we wrap up, I will mention we have 2 workshops that are somewhat related to this that you might be interested in attending. The one tomorrow is on academic integrity, academic conduct and misconduct at Ohio State. We will talk a fair amount about writing and source citation and things like that at that time. So if that interests you, definitely register for tomorrow morning's workshop. I'll be presenting that one myself. And we also have a session a week from today at 9 a.m. next Wednesday, the 18th. We will have representative from the Writing Center come and give an overview of the Writing Center's services, along with some other academic resources on campus. So that one also might be of interest to all of you. So let us know if you have any questions. You can type them into the chat or ask them out loud. I put my email address in the chat there. So even if you want to follow up with me individually about something, that's fine too. All right, so if there isn't anything else, we will go ahead and sign off for this morning. I hope to see you back again tomorrow morning. Thanks again, Lauren.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.